Welcome to the Dear Rochester Retire Well podcast with David Pulcini from 6 Point Financial Partners. In this podcast, find your path towards a brighter financial future with David as your guide as he helps individuals, educators, and healthcare professionals explore ways they can build wealth while minimizing risk using a multifaceted, comprehensive approach to personal finance. Are you ready to take the first step towards a brighter financial tomorrow? Let's get started.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Neil Lyons. Neil was a guest on episode 32, right, Neil? So
That's right.
Episode 32, Neil is an attorney and his practice area is estate planning, probate and trust administration, guardianship, and unlawful detainer, among some other things. We'll have to get into what all that stuff means, Neil, but how are you today, sir?
I'm doing all right. How you doing, Dave?
All right. Today's topic is powers of attorney, which we get a lot of questions about. And I wanted to bring on a more qualified person to talk about it than myself. So again, folks, we have Neil with us. Neil, give us what is a power of attorney?
So on the general side of things, powers of attorneys are a written document whereby you give somebody, a principal, the person who's executing the document gives an agent the authority to act on the principal's behalf. It basically creates a written guideline of an agency relationship, right? So you are our principal and you think that one day you might be on a trip in Europe and you may need to sell something, some stocks or whatever, but you don't have access to an electronic device that allows you to do it. You may be able to appoint an agent through a power of attorney to make those transactions for you. Okay.
So can you use me and my wife as an example so the
Sure.
listeners they can put this together? Because principals, agents, Neil, you're a smart guy and an attorney, so I don't want to confuse everybody right away. So use Dave and Allison.
Sure. So let's just say Allison wanted to give David the ability to sell a house on her behalf in the unlikely scenario that the two of you would own separate property. But let's just say Allison decided to be a daytime investor in real estate and she would give you David. So Allison would be the principal. David would be the agent. She would give David the ability to execute a real estate contract on her behalf, to sell the property on her behalf. And depending on how much involvement you have in that transaction, it could be anywhere from accepting the offer, which is the price, to executing the listing agreement, executing the as-is contract, all the way up to the closing documents. You could do that on Allison's behalf for her. It could be pretty much the entire transaction, and she may never even know about it. But the whole point is that you're able to do it for her, right? Of course, you have to do it in what we call a fiduciary capacity. In Allison's best interest, but that's essentially what it is.
Who enforces that, Neil? Like we also have a fiduciary standard as CFPs for most of us at our firm, and we act in a fiduciary capacity for our clients and to our clients. Who enforces that in a legal world? And the follow up to that is, then I'd love to hear the answer. What if I thought it was the best idea, but somebody else disagrees?
Well, that's a really, really good question. Okay. So in certain states probably have statutes. Florida is one of those that does. And there's other states that allows you to basically bring an agent into court if their actions meet certain criteria. If they're conducting actions in a way that's not in the best interest of the principal, they can certainly be brought into court and a court can review those actions. Unfortunately, there's not a government agency like you all have as licensed.
Yeah, FINRA.
Yeah, you name it. Yep. You got them all, right? All we really have is a court system, and I have to admit, somebody's statutes on what they call agent oversight are a little weak. There's not tons of teeth to them. And there's a lot of deference given to agents because if you think about it, you want an agent to be able to act as much as possible, right? I mean, that's the whole point of doing it, of naming an agent. But again, if it's one thing to be upset because, you sold a piece of property for Allison when maybe she didn't want you to sell it, right? It's quite another for you to have sold it at a fire sale price for no reason. Okay? Right. That's where you're going to run into a problem. And luckily in this case, she's your wife. So maybe she won't be that angry with you, Dave. Who knows? But then again, who knows? Right. But yeah, I mean, there are statutes that allow you to that allow a court to review an agent's conduct if an agent does act questionably in a questionable manner. Okay,
I got it. So bringing this back to some more basic financial planning stuff, what powers, or you mentioned powers of attorney, and I know this, but I want the listeners to know this. I mean, there are several different kinds of powers of attorney. We are typically dealing with a financial power of attorney. And especially as our population gets older, right? And their kids, their adult children are taking care of a lot of folks, and we need to get powers of attorney. So can you jump into that a little bit and then explain the financial power of attorney first, and then maybe some other kinds if you could?
So financial powers of attorney are so-called because it's going to give an agent, the person that you name, to be able to act on your behalf. It's going to give them control over a bulk of your property, essentially all of it, right? So what property are we talking about? Real property, investments, various financial matters. If you own a business, it allows them to enter into contracts on your behalf. It allows them to potentially file suit on your behalf. It allows them to deal with government benefits, file taxes on your behalf, deal with some tangible personal property. It's almost anything under the sun that's considered property, that's considered having to do with, or even then having to do with finances. So on the other hand, you have what's known as a healthcare power of attorney. They can be called healthcare surrogate designations. That's the ability for you to make reasonable informed healthcare decisions on behalf of another person if they can't make those decisions themselves.
Okay. Yeah, we run into a lot of folks, again, that are in their 50s, 60s, some in their 70s, that their parents are still around, and now they're getting to the point where they can't make these decisions. So, one quick action item, if you're listening, is if you don't have this, I should say, make sure that people are taken care of, or that you have the proper authority to help the folks out that are going to need help, because we run into it too many times. And I want to hear some horror stories from you, Neil. I've seen it 100 times where
there's plenty.
Yeah, I know, where they didn't have a power of attorney, or they couldn't execute, and somebody was unable to make decisions due to incapacity or illness or whatever it might be. But let me ask you this, because I do get this question all the time. So I'll say it as if this is a recent question I had from a client. I'm 60 years old. My mom is going into a home. She's no longer able to sign anything. Can I go get power of attorney over her? Or can I go get power of attorney over anybody?
That's one of the most common questions I get from people calling my office, asking me, hey, I want to get power of attorney over my mom, or I want to get power of attorney over my dad. And the short answer is absolutely not. There's only one person in the world that can grant you the ability to act on their behalf, and that is the principal. That's it. Usually what people are talking about in that specific case, where they say, okay, I want to get power of attorney over my mom or my dad or any various individual, they're really talking about some form of court instituted or court initiated guardianship. Right. That's really what they're talking about in that situation. And if I might go back to that situation when you were talking about with you and Allison, where you might act on Allison's behalf. I think it's important for the audience to understand a lot of times when these powers, when an agent, the person that's given the authority, when they're acting, it's typically not when the principal is able to act themselves. The agent's actions are usually going to be when the principal is incapacitated. That's going to be the vast majority of the time. Yeah. There's exceptions. There's absolutely exceptions. But the vast majority of the time, the agent is going to, as they say, earn their money when that principal is incapacitated. That is the point of appointing. That is the whole entire point of naming an agent and allowing them to work on your to conduct actions on your behalf.
Yeah. So, I do get this question too, and thanks for that answer. What if I want a power of attorney, but I don't want them to know about it?
That's a very good question. No, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's so like I want to assign. Let's say I'm not married, and I want my brother to be my power of attorney, and I don't want him signing stuff if he gets into financial trouble or something like that, and moving my money to wherever he wants. And I know obviously we talked about there could be action against that, but it would take some time and more money. Mm-hmm. What if I just didn't want him to know? Is that
it is common. It's not as common as you think. And your situation is one of those rare circumstances when I might say, okay, you don't want them to know. Fine, don't tell them. What you do is the power of attorney document itself, the document that outlines who you've named as your agent, the person that's going to make decisions for you, and what authority they have. It's usually about 18 to 20 pages. Some of them are longer. And you can just hold on to that and let the person who you've named as agent, you can let them know, hey, God forbid anything should happen to me. Here's where these documents are. They're on my shelf inside an envelope, right? Or they're at my attorney's office. And my attorney's been informed that should he or she receive information that something's happened to me, they are to immediately send this information to your brother, in your case, your brother. Okay, I'm instructed. So let's just say I'm your attorney, and you say, Neil, if anything happens to me, I want you to send my brother David. Oh, excuse me. Oh, your mom gave you the same name. I want you to send my brother Brian my power of attorney so he knows what to do. Okay. So I said, no problem. What's his email address? There you go. So then I would find out, hey, Dave's been in a car accident, God forbid, of course, and he is not able to talk. And then at that point in time, I obviously have it documented. I will then send that information to Brian, your brother, which, of course, you've already given me written authorization to be able to share information with him. Right? Yep. So that's one way of doing it. You can have an attorney hold on to it until a specific point in time, right? Or you can just simply tell your brother, hey, if anything happens to me, this is where you're going to find the information. You need to help me.
I feel like most folks listening, or this would be me, is, Neil, how would you know? I feel like I'd have to tell my brother, in that case, Brian, if something happens to me, reach out to Neil.
That works too.
Well, I think
that works too.
Because how would the attorney know how would you know that I'm in a car accident?
Yeah, you really, again, you wouldn't. It's a good point. You really wouldn't. So yeah, usually it's going to be somebody calling me and saying, hey, something terrible's happened to my brother. He's going to be okay, but he's not able to do anything. Yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, I have instructions for this right here. I'll go ahead and send you the information you need. Now, that's a very clear-cut, easy thing to say, right?
Yep.
Excuse me. It's a very clear-cut scenario. Things get very complicated when there's issues, right? And this is why I tell people, never ever select an agent that you don't 100% trust. Okay.
Yep.
Because the motto of these documents is it allows you to name somebody to essentially take control of your entire financial livelihood, right?
Yeah.
But as a result, that means it has the potential to do the most damage if you've picked the wrong person. And that's something I cannot say I can't say enough.
Yeah. Yep. I've seen it, Neil, where I've had folks that want to name maybe a child, a grown child or an adult child as their child as a power of attorney. And I know that person may not be the right person for that. So I can't tell them not to do it. Right. So you try to give your best advice and point some things out, but it's hard to overcome that when somebody wants potentially an irresponsible child or cousin or whoever it is to become their power of attorney. So do you ever run into that? And if you do you have to tell people, like, if you're acting in a fiduciary capacity, do you have to tell people it may be a bad idea?
It's more just, it's more, yes. Well, I don't have to tell them but it's good advice, right? To do, to say, look, make sure you pick somebody that you trust to do this. I've written blogs about, okay, it's holiday time, instead of talking about stuff people that people love talking about, like politics and religion, everybody loves talking about. Why don't you talk about who is going to take control who's going to be in control of, the finances or healthcare decision making if God forbid something happens to you. That's the best conversation to have, right? But when I say, why do I say it should be done when everybody's together? Because that's the best time, right? So what you want to do is like, let's just say you have a family, your family's visiting you at Christmas, right? Mom, dad, everybody's there. Mom, dad, you and your brother, right? Everybody's sitting around. And that's the time, there's a time when you're all going to sit by the fire if you're up north, or if you're going to be sitting out at the beach if you're down here in Florida. And that's when you say, listen, we've made some decisions and we've picked the two of you to help us with certain aspects of our lives, should we not be able to. Okay. So you say, okay, David, we're going to pick you. We picked you to be our power of attorney, right? And you're going to make financial decisions on our behalf if we're not able to. Well, then all of a sudden you see Brian start sniffing a little bit, you know what I mean? and Brian's really upset. And my advice to people when I tell them to do this is that you cannot be afraid to hurt someone's feelings. This is one of the most important things that somebody is going to do for you, right? Say, Brian, I see you over there getting sniffly, right? And just remember, we picked David because David has a degree in calculus from MIT. And Brian, we didn't pick you because you owe money to dangerous people, right? So that's why we didn't pick you, okay? But you will be able to make healthcare decisions for us because you do have a background in medicine, right? You were a pharmaceutical sales rep. And so therefore, we're going to allow you to make healthcare decisions for us, Brian. But please be okay with David we're telling you, we're not asking you, you need to be okay with David making decisions for us when it comes to our finances. Those kind of conversations, David, are not easy to have. People do not like having them, but they are extraordinarily important. What causes the most problems? Surprises. Surprises are what causes. I had no idea my sister was going to be able to take care of their finances. My sister has, she's had 16 cars repoed. Why in the world would they have picked her? There's a lot of times people pick their one children or another with no rhyme or reason. They just do it. And I try to advise them completely against that. Because again, these documents give people a lot of authority and they have a very large potential to do serious damage.
Yeah, I feel like if you had to put it in order, Neil, is it politics, religion, or talking about this stuff? Which one ends the Christmas party the fastest?
Probably this. Probably this, and like I said, there's that sort of that situation where you get invited to somebody's house and you're quickly disinvited when the conversation turns a way that it shouldn't turn, right? Because, you and I are people that just avoid those we're not going to have those conversations. We're not worried about that. We're going to talk about sports and fun things like that, Right. But even that could get bad. It just depends, So I figure, hey, why not? Let's have a little family bonding time over who's going to make financial decisions for us. I'm telling you, David, there's nothing that's going to sober everybody up really quick other than who's going to get control of Dad's 50 Cooterans that he's been collecting for the last 16 years. Especially with the price of gold. Oh,
I know those, but what are those?
Those are gold coins, typically used as an investment device.
Neil, with the proper definition. I love it. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. And what we do is, for our clients at least, we will send a video out to the beneficiaries or the power of attorney or the healthcare proxy person to hopefully let them know if our clients want us to do this, that, hey, if anything ever happens, you can get a hold of Dave. It's just another point of contact and Dave can get you in touch with the attorney. And then at least it's this big ecosystem of, I guess, responsibility and taking care of things. So why don't you give us a couple horror stories if you can?
Well, absolutely. And I know everybody's super eager to get to that. But I just want to say, I just want to make a comment about what you just said, because I think that it's really important to have I'd like to call it an elder caring network, right? And it's what is that? It's a network of people that are intimately familiar with the person's finances, their wishes, their desires, their family. It's the holy trinity team, right? The financial advisor, the CPA, and the attorney. All of us are together in this symbiotic relationship with the client. All three, we all three share the client, and we all know what their wishes are, what their family makeup is, what the do's and don'ts are. That is extraordinarily important moving forward in our country, especially with so many people getting to the age where they're, getting into that elderly age, getting into that 70 plus population.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, and what is it? 10,000 people a day are turning 65 right now.
That's what's. I think so. I don't listen. I'm not, and I'm very careful about making wholehearted factual statements. I don't like getting fact checked, but I'm going to take your word for it. I think you're right, though. I think that I've heard that.
I'm sure it's not exactly 10,000 every day, by the way.
Pretty darn close,
but it's got to be close. So what that means is, we've never seen this before in the history of our country or any country, or the demographics aging the way that they are. What is it? 70 million people are taking Social Security right now. They never thought that was going to happen. When Social Security was set up, by the way, what was it? 1934. The life expectancy, you're supposed to get it at 65. The life expectancy was only 62.
Incredible.
So the reason I say that is we never thought that these demographic shifts would happen the way that they have. And as a mass population, if we don't have these documents and this estate planning stuff and all these other things taken care of, it's going to create major issues all over the place. And
and I kind of wonder sometimes whether, I've heard that before too. So that the average, when they created Social Security, the average age was 62. The average life expectancy was 62, and the average age of retirement, the age at which you could pull, Social Security was 65, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
I imagine when everybody found out about that, they probably felt the same way you and I feel when we get to a hotel and we find out we have to pay extra for parking. We're not happy about it. You can't tell me there's not some sort of scam going on here. You know what I mean? But anyways,
I don't know if they knew it would backfire at any point. So.
Who knew? I mean, those,
yeah,
especially at that time, it was a very severe financial crisis.
Of course. So again, we're keeping people waiting here. Neil, this is what people love to commiserate. People love to commiserate, right? They love to hear the stories, and they love to hear. I mean, it's terrible to say, but a lot of people enjoy hearing I'll say it this way, other folks' mistakes so that they don't make the same mistakes.
That's right.
So if you could give us 1, 2, 3, 5, 20 of those in the next 10 minutes, go ahead.
Sure. There's now, mind the fact that a lot of this is going to be changed for privacy purposes.
Yeah.
Okay. And, obviously for confidentiality purposes.
Oh, you have real stories. This is great. All right.
Well, yeah, they're based off of real stories, right?
Okay. Gotcha.
So anyways, let's just say you have a family, right? An elderly mother and a father, the mother and a father, that mother and father, they have 3 children, right? 3 adult children, and they all themselves have, children themselves. So that, you have a whole 3 generations. And let's just say you have the mother and father both have been terrified of moving into an assisted living facility. They want to age in place. They want to age in the home. It's a very common, it's a very common desire, right? I mean, I'm not a fan of having to go someplace that's not my home and wait it out until the sun sets. But either way, so they're terrified of having to go into this facility, right? And there's a savvy child that knows that. And so that child one day goes to the mother and the father and say, hey, I don't know if you know this, but my siblings are planning on putting you into an ALF. But let me tell you this, if you put me in charge, if you name me as your power of attorney, as your agent, I'll make sure that never happens. So you can't put them in charge. They're going to do it, but I'll make sure you age in place, right? So name me as your power of attorney, right? So, why is my voice changed into this sinister sounding speech? Because it was extraordinarily sinister, right? So at the point in time where the elderly couple was told this, they went ahead and did it. And nobody in the family had any idea, right? They were a very close-knit family. And so what ends up happening? So they named their child, their adult child, their power of attorney. And this power of attorney slowly starts to isolate them, slowly starts to cut off contact, right? Shuts down access to them, starts, taking over bank accounts, right? Starts changing beneficiary designations on the accounts, which you're allowed to do in certain states. In Florida, if you specifically give somebody the authority, right? It's called the special powers provisions. If you give them the authority to change beneficiary designations by initialing by that power, they have it. They have it. Yep. So when I said it has the potential to do the most damage, this is what we're talking about here. So all these things are changed, right? And all these beneficiary designations are changed. The power of attorney, essentially, the elderly couples, her parents' house for like $800,000 less than it was worth.
Oh, geez.
So, and by the time all this happened and everybody figured out what was going on, it was too late because one of the parents had died. And then there was just the surviving parent left over who, and that poor person had no idea what day of the week it was.
Yeah. And
so, it essentially the entire estate planning apparatus was changed by that power of attorney, right? Because it wasn't the wills. It wasn't the will that was the problem. It was the trust, because powers of attorney don't have the ability to mess around with a will, but they do with trusts. And especially, again, remember when I told you that you have to execute a specific authority for somebody to change beneficiary designations? It's the same way with trusts. You have to specifically give them the ability to create trusts, amend trusts, revoke trusts, et cetera. And of course, that person was given all those powers. Okay. And so everybody was basically locked out of the, and it was a decent sized estate. It was over. That's life-changing for anybody. So, and nobody realized what was going on until it was all said and done.
Well, yeah. Who's tracking that? So my question, if I'm listening, might be, and there's no way an attorney like yourself would even know this, if mom and dad and this sinister child show up and say, hey, here's what we want. Here's what you need to tell them. How would the attorney even know? Because my first thought is, how the attorney allow this to happen? But there's no way you'd know.
So I have actually a long-standing rule, right? If somebody shows up with parents and they are insistent that their parents want to name them as the sole heir of their estate, I pretty much send them packing. I'm not interested in having my files subpoenaed and having to go to depositions in any kind of, a probate litigation. You know what I mean? That's a practical decision that every attorney needs to make for their, in their own practice. But it's one that it's a pretty hard, fast rule that I've decided to stand by. So, for me, it really doesn't happen. I just say, no. I'm not interested in doing that. Because it tears families apart. It tears them apart. Now, if it's an existing client and I know about their family situation and they haven't spoken, I know they haven't spoken to their children in 20 years, it's a different story. I mean, I know the person.
Right. We face the same thing. I've had people change beneficiaries and powers of attorney, right? Everything's in place. They could try to change a beneficiary, and they can. I've sat with those elderly parents, for example, and just look them in the eye and say, do you actually want this? Do you know this is happening? Do you want this?
Yeah.
And because for most of our clients, at least I know for the most part, what they do and don't want on there. And if something fishy is going on. So that's interesting.
It's in that particular situation too, it's usually a child that, as the other children in the situation would say to me, they're very dominating. They're very, overpowering, you know what I mean? And so it's, if you're not in that scenario, you really don't know. Right. Because of course you and I might think dominating. I don't think so. I'm going to handle this.
Right.
But unless you're there, you just don't know.
Right.
You're not the family dynamic. We're not in it. We're kept out of it. So we don't see what's going on until all the dust is settled.
Yeah.
And that's why it's, and really whispering in somebody's ear that was terrified of going to an ALF, that everybody else in your family would love nothing more than to throw you into these facilities and lock the key, and lock the door and throw away the key. I mean, it's cruel. Quite frankly, it's very cruel, and especially look, if they had money, I'm telling you, there are some ALFs out there that I'd rather move into than where I'm living now. You know what I'm saying? I don't live in a bad place at all. I mean, so that's the point, right? But let's not forget that these are individuals that grew up in a time, and people that are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s where, when you would retire, unless you had oodles and oodles and oodles of money, it wasn't the nicest place to go. Now it's resort living. I mean, it's like going to Disney World half the time with some of these places. So, but you get it. Look, I mean, I have great sympathy, and I'm getting a little off topic, so forgive me, for people that want to age in place, age in home. So I get that.
Yeah.
But, and I know how darn expensive that is, because at some point in time where those individuals are going to need that extra care, they're going to need it. And that very, very large amount of money.
Yeah. Which brings in different, even types of financial planning stuff. Right. So yeah. Do you have any more stories like that for us? We have time for one more. Give us one.
There's
more.
Another one. Yeah. And this is actually one you see often, right? You have a person that's actually in the ALF, right? They pulled the trigger, decided to go in the ALF. They don't want to deal with it, right?
Hey, Neil, what's an ALF? Tell everybody what an ALF is.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. No, it's an assisted living facility.
There you go. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So you have a person that's in this assisted living facility, and they named a child. They had more than one child. They named a child as their power of attorney. And that power of attorney was doing some things on the side that they shouldn't have been doing. And the other two siblings found out, and they went to the facility to talk to their parent. And their parent was, they had some cognitive issues and some deficits. And so that parent was, but they were, they had enough cognition to understand exactly what those kids were saying to them, right? Which is, hey, child over here is messing around with your finances. So what ended up happening is that power of the person who was the power of attorney caught wind of it, and that power of attorney told that assisted living facility to ban their siblings from seeing their mother, because it's causing their mother all sorts of trauma, stress, and emotional discomfort, et cetera. So, and what ended up happening was the two siblings had to file for a guardianship. Right. They had to file for a guardianship, a court proceeding, because of the actions of the power of attorney. And that costs a lot of money, a lot of time. When in reality, these powers of attorney documents, those are designed to prevent you from having to have a guardian. You've already named somebody to make decisions for you. Right. You don't need a court to put somebody in that position to make those decisions for you. So that particular situation happens actually a lot. The moment you cut off communication, information, access, someone's going to talk to an attorney. I am telling you, I get at least 1 to 2 calls a week,
Oh,
On average, right? It's not every week, but it feels like 1 or 2 a week where someone says, my brother or my sister has cut off my ability to talk to my mother. I said, okay, what's going on? Well, my mother's at an assisted living facility, this one over here. And they are the director or the executive director is not allowing me to see my mother. It's saying my brother has forbade me from seeing my mother because I caused my mother trauma or stress or emotion. She gets upset when I leave. And it's a tough spot for them to be in. They don't know what to do. And some of these facilities, a power of attorney doesn't really have the authority to tell an ALF to ban people from seeing their parents, right? But these facilities, they don't, they're not the wiser. They're just trying to, hey, they're the person in charge. I'm just trying to. We don't want to get sued. We don't want anybody to bring a lawsuit against us. So they feel like their hands are tied. That's why it is extraordinarily important to make sure that the person you pick to be your agent is the right person, a person who's not going to do that. It's not good. You could talk to 20 of my colleagues around here, and they'll probably tell you the same exact thing I'm telling you, that they have those calls on a weekly basis.
That's interesting. I actually have not heard that happen yet, but I don't get those stories. Usually I just get the financial stuff.
And it shatters the family, whatever cohesion that family had. And again, who knows how much cohesion they had if that's what's going on. But whatever happened, it's gone. It is done. It is shattered. They are no longer a family anymore. And essentially, everybody's declaring war at that point. And attorneys are ready. Hey, we're ready. If you got to, listen, David, this is my motto. If people got along, I wouldn't have a job.
That's true. It's true.
And you know what? And for the sake of that, and I don't mean to be self-aggrandizing if I sound like it, if everybody did start getting along tomorrow, I'll find something else to do. I like what I do. But for the sake of everybody getting along, I'd find something else to do. I don't know, maybe I'll drive a NASCAR or something. I don't know. Who knows? Figure it out.
So, all right, I have 2 more questions for you. One is, if somebody needs to update powers of attorney or any specific power of attorney, where do they begin?
The question there that you ask is an interesting one. So anytime you are moving from one state to another state and you have documents, call a local attorney and ask them to review those documents for you. Okay. So if you have a trust, a will, power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, whatever they're calling them in the state that you're moving from, call up a local attorney and say, hey, would you mind reviewing these documents for me? My firm doesn't charge, a consult fee for that. I know a lot of firms around here don't either. I think I do a little bit better job than they do, but that's just,
You have a lot of people moving too, right?
That's correct. There's a lot of people moving. So call a local elder law attorney or an attorney that does estate planning and say, hey, would you mind reviewing my documents for me? And most likely what they're going to say is, hey, I recommend you update it to this state's documents. It's just going to be a lot easier if somebody needs to act on your behalf, because you're going to take that document over to, name whatever big bank you want to. They're going to throw it over to legal for 7 or 8 days. It's a heck of a lot easier if that document is in conformity with the laws of the state that you're moving in. It doesn't mean that your old documents are going to be invalid. It doesn't mean that. It just can cause some hiccups that you don't need.
Yeah. So I guess with the power of attorney thing, how often should somebody review it?
Well, if every 5 years, I think is a good time frame. Florida did their last. I'm giving Florida as an example. Florida did their last overhaul on their power of attorney statute in 2011. They haven't really done many tweaks or changes since then, but still, it's a good idea. Every 5 years, just to see what's going on.
And for the listeners, I think this. Very, very, very few people review this stuff every 5 years.
Oh, no one. It's almost nobody.
I wanted to say no one, but I'm not allowed to say that, right? I can't guarantee anything or give absolute. So I'll say very. Yeah,
it's like what did I tell you on the last podcast? As an attorney, David, I can only wish you, but in no way guarantee you a pleasant day.
That's right. That's right. So I have one more question for you, Neil, just because we mentioned at the very beginning, and I don't think anybody knows what this is. Well, I can't say that either, right? Very, very few people know what this is. When you say that your practice area is unlawful detainer, what is that?
So think of let's just say that you decided to go visit your wife's parents, right? Because you like your in-laws, and you go up there and you just drop your bags and you decide to stay. You're there for about 3-4 weeks. Okay. Maybe a little bit longer.
This sounds amazing.
And I'm glad you get along with your in-laws that well. That's awesome. My mother-in-law is great too. So you decide to stay there 5-6 weeks, and they say, "Look, Dave, we're thinking it's time for you to go, okay? Because you're it's getting a little crazy. You got friends over here doing donuts in the front yard. We just can't have this. And so you say, I don't want to leave. I'm not leaving. And you refuse to leave. So depending on the time frame, your wife's parents have inadvertently created kind of a sort of interest in property, on your behalf. It's like a lease without a lease. And in order to get you to go, you're basically, for lack of a better word at this point, David, a squatter. Okay. And they got to get rid of you. So
they can't trespass, or they can't say I'm trespassing or shooting.
They can anything? Certainly. Well, okay. Well, listen, listen.
I know my in-laws. That's why
I know this is Florida, and you know what I mean. And for some people, the solution to that problem is to use a firearm. But I'm not going to recommend that to anybody. It's not safe, anyways. But they may have to resort to a court proceeding. Okay, it's think of it as you need to evict a tenant, but this person's never paid rent before. And as a matter of fact, this person is racking up cable bills because they're subscribing to every streaming service known to humanity. Okay, and it's no good. It's just no good. So it's essentially eviction, but without the existence of a lease agreement or rental payments.
So how long do I have to stick it out at my in-laws before they would have to take it to court?
It depends. Okay, it's really going to depend, right? It's going to depend. Really, usually what happens is the person calls me and says, I can't believe I can't get my son out of here. I called the sheriff, and the sheriff said, it's been here a while. You're going to have to go through a court proceeding. And that's where I come in.
I've never heard of this, but I'm imagining I'm minimally going to threaten my in-laws with this for a better Christmas present or something this year.
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't get a lot of requests for it, but you can imagine in Florida with the large elderly population, and you have, hey mom, I'm between jobs right now. I'm outdoors. You know what I mean? But I'm parking cars over at the local Marina Jack. But look, can I just stay here and shack up for a little bit? Because rents are super high, and one thing leads to another. And now all of a sudden you got to resort to a court action to get your son out of there because again, he's subscribing to, Disney Plus and Netflix and stuff you don't even want to watch, It's time to go. So
don't mess with the TV programming, right?
Hey, listen, man, the binge watch is important, and don't play games with that. All right. Cable's expensive enough. That's
right. So, all right, Neil, listen, we appreciate your time. I think there are a lot of folks that would actually enjoy a meeting with an attorney like yourself at least it's not a boring meeting for sure. How do people get a hold of you?
Sure. They can get me on my email at ntl@lginjuryfirm.com. My bosses do personal injury. I do the estate planning side of things.
That sounds like a good partnership. Neil, we appreciate your time, sir. We'll hope to have you back again. There are endless amounts of stories that we could talk about, but we'll stop it there for today.
Dave. Thank you.
Yeah. Folks, you can find us at www.sixpointfp.com, or you can find me, David Pulcini, CFP, on LinkedIn. But for now, make it a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Dear Rochester Retire Well podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of 6 Point Financial Partners. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
Securities offered through American Portfolios Financial Services, Inc., APFS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through American Portfolios Advisors, Inc., APA, an SEC-registered investment advisor. 6 Point Financial is not affiliated with APFS and APA. This material is for informational purposes only. Neither APFS nor its representatives provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Please consult your own tax, legal, or accounting professional before making any decisions.